Hello, everyone. My name is Aaron Christensen. This is Horror 101 with Dr. AC, celebrating classic horror throughout history with new episodes every Friday night. Tonight, we're discussing Mario Bava's Black Sunday, aka The Mask of Satan from 1960, one of the most atmosphere-drenched cinematic forays into the supernatural. Marrying the feel of the Universal classics with the darkness of a grim fairy tale, and adding in the gorier and sexier feel of the rising hammer-colored Gothics, this tour de force directorial debut introduced the world to Italian DP Mario Bava and scream queen in the making Barbara Steele, both becoming genre superstars overnight. The breathtaking opening sequence, featuring a spike-studded bronze mask, shocked audiences around the world, passing instantly into horror film iconography. The following 85 minutes see Bava weaving an elaborate tapestry of atmosphere and gloom over this tale of vengeance visited upon the family that burned the witch Asia and her lover at the stake 200 years before. While there are a few elements of the fantastic story that break new ground, this is an unabashedly gorgeous exercise in style and stunning black and white cinematography. Steele is outstanding as Asia and her modern-day descendant Katia, both of whom share screen time with upcoming Hammer star John Richardson. This masterpiece of Gothic mood will linger in the mind long after the lights come up and is absolutely required viewing for any horror fan. Plus, Bava's pioneering work here paved the way for fellow auteurs Dario Argento and Lucio Fulci and gave rise to an entirely new subgenre, the Italian horror film. We've reached the end of the week, which means it's Black Sunday. We're going to be talking about Mario Bava's Gothic masterpiece celebrating its 65th anniversary, and we have an incredible panel to chat about it with me. Let's bring everybody in, and let's say hello to Craig J. Clark.
Hello, everyone.
Niall Arena.
Hi.
Ian Simmons.
Hello.
Cullen Wade.
No, Griabi, it is I who repudiate you.
And rounding out our sacred circle, Alan Trump.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mirgorod, where we have wonderful salmon and excellent vodka.
And we're going to be talking about Black Sunday from 1960, celebrating its 65th anniversary. And we will be talking spoilers, so everybody just prepare yourselves. Thanks for coming on the show, and welcome. Wow, thanks, everybody. Welcome to October. We're kicking things off in style with a truly spooky, wonderful, Gothic, Halloween-feeling type of movie. And it also marks the directorial debut, or at least the official directorial debut of Mario Bava, who we featured on the show several times now, and several of you have been on those panels. So welcome back to our Bava Fest. Ian, I want to kick things off with you because we covered Black Sunday on your long-running Italian love fest, Accademia Giallo, over at Kicking the Seat. Was that the first time you had seen Black Sunday, or had you seen it prior to when we watched it for your show?
That was the first time that I'd seen it, and it makes sense because had I seen it before, I would not have included it in Accademia Giallo. It's one of the strangest decisions I've ever made. But yeah, that was the first time.
You were warned, however.
But I always take the challenge because sometimes when that is it Giallo or is it not comes up, it leads to a robust discussion, and you never know how it's going to end up. But I don't remember where I came down on that, but I'm still cringing from embarrassment.
It's not a Giallo.
There's not a black glove in sight. Well, no, there is in the first
It's
scene,
all black gloves, yeah.
Yeah, so that's where I stand. I've seen some more Bava films in the intervening years, so it really helps to solidify this as a bold thesis statement. I mean, you really can't top that opening scene with the I'm not even call it a witch trial, it's just a witch execution, but with everything from the mask to the blood coming out of it. I mean, I was amazed then, and I am still today, that was 1960, as far as how graphic and frankly upsetting it is, how beautiful. This is the perfect October movie to put on, especially with the Blu-ray that came out a few years ago. It's crisp, it's bold, it is the season.
Niall, let's bounce up to you. I think you were on our Black Sabbath panel.
Yes, always a great time with Black Sabbath. Great time with Black Sunday, or The Mask of Satan. I was trying to think, actually, where I saw it first. And I think Black Sabbath was indeed the kind of first Mario Bava I saw. And I can't remember if I had seen it prior to, but I'm going to say I got to audit when I was a high school student a history and politics of the horror film class. And one of the screenings for that week was a double bill of the horror of Dracula, the 1958 kind of Hammer, and then Black Sunday. But it just kind of blew me away. You expect certain things maybe from a 1960 black and white kind of dubbed movie. And then I think especially the kind of phantom carriage, the kind of soundless arrival made me sit up in my seat.
I think the first time I saw Black Sunday was on the Sci-Fi Channel. This is like going back to like the mid 90s when they had like theme weeks for the entire month of October. There was one week that was all werewolf movies. There was one week that was all ghost movies. And there was one week that was all witches movies. And this was one of those movies that they showed during that week. And it made a big impression on me. I've seen it, I don't know, half a dozen times since then. I probably bought it half a dozen times. It's one of those, I have the Anchor Bay DVD. I have the Kino Blu-ray. I got the one that Shout Factory just put out, the whole box set. I have the Arrow Blu-ray, which is great. If I had a region-free player, I'd love to watch it in Italian one of these days. But but it's one of those movies that it's just perennial. It's like, oh, there's a new edition of Black Sunday. I guess I got to get it. It's just one of those movies.
Awesome. Cullen, that's the first time I think we're talking about a movie that doesn't have a swimming pool in it this year.
Yep.
Cullen is the author of a new book that's coming out called
Splasher Flicks. Yes.
Splasher
the swimming
Flicks.
Pool in horror cinema. It's coming out from McFarland. And now I can finally say December 11th. It finally has a release date. So
Fantastic.
the pre-orders are up, but there are no pools. Well, there's a pond.
There's a little pond,
There's
exactly.
like a little swampy area in this, so we can maybe make it fit. Sort of like Nile, memory's fuzzy. It might have been the first Bava film I saw. I know that my first Bava film had either black or blood in the title because I saw I saw Black Sunday, Black Sabbath, Blood and Black Lace, and Bay of Blood all around the same time. It was that late teens, early 20s. Back when I think for a North American budding horror enthusiast, you're sort of, after you venture outside of North America, pretty soon you encounter the Italian big three, Bava, Argento, Fulci. And I definitely pitched my tent in the Bava camp largely on the strength of this film, because I just thought it was sort of like Ian said, I still think it's one of the most exquisite looking black and white films I've ever seen. I think that was around the time that Anchor Bay was putting out all of the Bava stuff, like their first run of Bava DVDs. And that is the one I still have. I haven't succumbed to the temptation to buy every new issue of it. Only by the skin of my teeth have I escaped that, because I really do love this film.
And Alan, how about you?
This would have been like the late 70s or early 80s. I was at a St. Louis science fiction convention, and they showed trailers for different films, science fiction and horror films. And they showed one for Black Sunday, and I had never seen this thing. And the trailer emphasizes Yavuto rising out of the crypt and Asa's tomb exploding. And I'm like, what is this? And I only saw that. And of course, that's also the trailer where they have the comment, the narrator talks about Satan wearing strange robes. Everybody always laughed at that. I don't know why. But the next time I got to see it, it never showed up in any of the television rotations. Here in St. Louis, we saw Black Sabbath quite a bit, but Black Sunday never quite made it. And I'm wearing my Goulardi t-shirt today. He was the Cleveland horror host, and Black Sunday would have been a little extreme for them. They're busy showing like Attack of the Giant Leeches and Killer Shrews and stuff. But a friend of mine finally was in a little bootleg VHS business, and he sent me, I bought a copy from him, and wow, I was amazed, even with second generation and everything like that, how fantastic a movie it was. The only problem that I had with it then was that every now and then, since it came off broadcast television, every now and then the WPIX Denver station logo would show up in the middle of the crypt and stuff. So, but since then I picked it up, and like I said, several DVD releases, probably my all-time favorite Gothic horror film.
Yeah, this was definitely one that I came to later. I'd seen Black Sabbath because it did show in some rotation. But my friend David White, who was on the Black Sabbath panel a couple of years back, he was kind of my intro to Italian horror. We were doing a show together, and I think there was a Hitchcock festival playing on AMC at the time. And I was talking about, watching a lot of these Hitchcock movies. And he said, "Hey, are you aware of Dario Argento, the Italian Hitchcock?" And I said, "No." And he proceeded to, show me a lot of Argento films. But then he also, having kicked that door open, much like you, he handed me a bootleg tape of Black Sunday. And again, even in that kind of degraded VHS form, the style on display is just unmistakable and so impressive. And I think where this landed in terms of it coming out in 1960, I like to mention that, 1960 is just like one of my favorite years in horror, because we have Peeping Tom, we have Village of the Damned, we have Psycho, of course, and this film. And speaking of Psycho, I feel like the shower scene is, of course, part of history. But the scene, this opening scene, is so indelible. It is so powerful. It is so shocking. The fact that it happens, and that's the start of the movie, is like, okay, that's the ride we're in for. This is one that kind of straddles that weird line of, is it a witch movie? Is it a vampire movie? Like, what's the monster here? The fact that it came out in 1960, it also is landing in that place between the Universal horrors and the Hammer wave. Hammer is starting to bring that new flesh and blood to the screen. And this is a movie that attracted a lot of fans because it lands kind of in both camps. It's gory and gooey and sexy, and it's also in black and white, and there's a lot of shadows and fog and things like that. So I think it was able to appeal to both the old school and the new Hammer fans. And I think that's why it became, such a hit. Also, AIP putting it out didn't hurt. That meant it got in front of a lot of eyeballs in the drive-ins and the hard tops.
There's one thing I wanted to read, actually. You mentioned the opening scene.
Yeah.
When I wrote about this for the website Crooked Marquee 5 years ago for its 60th anniversary, this was my lead paragraph. It's one of the most striking openings in cinema history. A burly, shirtless man in a black hood strokes a brazier, heating up a branding tool, which will be used to sear the letter S into the flesh of accused vampire Princess Vaja, who is being executed for her crimes alongside her lover and accomplice, Igor Javutic. We're in 17th century Moldavia, a time and place where, according to the narration, Satan was abroad on the earth, and those who consort with him are dealt with harshly by the High Court of the Inquisition. After receiving the brand of Satan in queasy close-up, Asa is condemned to death and repudiated by her brother, the Grand Inquisitor, who then orders his men to cover her face with the mask of Satan, adding the chilling command, "Nail it down." As the mask is carried toward the camera, the shadows of the spikes on its inside dance in the firelight, emphasizing their lethality. Then, as it is placed over Asa's immobilized face, another hooded man steps forward with a giant mallet. ... That opening, that's your first 2 minutes of the movie.
From like English lit classes way back in the day, talking about the Gothic and the characteristics of the Gothic, I think the things that stick with me most in terms of the context of the Gothic are night journeys, which we have here, corruptible and or corrupted maidens, spaces with secrets. So it's not just that the people have secrets, it's that the space itself is bigger on the inside than it looks on the outside. Hidden tunnels, secret passageways, sort of the space kind of becomes an analog for the characters. It sort of opens up, it sort of pries it open and reveals its history and the sort of maggots squirming underneath. And I think to me that is, and Bava, of course, shoots the interiors of the castle with like such beautiful textures and the lighting. It's just like the way he shoots the interiors are just all texture, and the way he shoots the exteriors is a lot more about light and shadow. But the interiors is just like every bit of the frame, there's something to look at stone, moss, cracks in the masonry, and I think just like this sort of loving examination, almost like a scientific examination of the textures of the interiors, is the most like visually Gothic thing to me, I think.
Thanks, Colin, for spelling out the qualities of the Gothic genre. I don't think I'd ever heard that before or really considered it, or even what Gothic meant. I just kind of always assumed it to mean old and creepy. But no, and this movie does do old and creepy in spades. And I think the thing about Hammer films, that they always have, well, not always, but often, especially in the earlier takes, they had these great, interior kind of like old Gothic settings with grand fireplaces and libraries and things. And you see a lot of that here in Bava's first film. So it really does feel like you could go there or like reach into your screen and be transported into this other world, very much alive with a history and a texture, as you mentioned. But I also love the sort of ideas that were new to me, and I haven't seen them executed in other pieces in this genre this time. Specifically, the notion of the cross kind of standing above a coffin in which a vampire or a demon or someone who was evil had been entombed, with a kind of a window so that their face was constantly having to be looked down upon by a cross, so that if they ever did reanimate, they would be trapped there. And then what happens if something happens to that cross and evil gets out? I haven't seen that before, and I haven't seen it since. And it was just one of those things where you watch enough movies, like everything, there's nothing new under the sun, and then you see something from 1960, and you're like, wow, I'm on my feet applauding. So there's all sorts of neat surprises throughout Black Sunday, which I love discovering. I think my one gripe is that I don't think Bava topped the drama or the suspense or the mania of that opening 2 minutes. It's like, wow, we're off to the races now. The rest of the movie's solid and has moments of greatness, but there's nothing to say, okay, here's how we're starting. You're not going to believe how we end.
One of the other tenets, as I understand it, and I'm not quibbling with you, Cullen, about what defines the Gothic literature genre, but the notion of something in the past having been corrupted but unresolved, right? And we see this kind of going through as it goes into the Southern Gothic, right? And that idea of kind of, the antebellum South kind of having these unresolved things. But even the Gothic genre, it's this idea that the maybe the decadence or the sins or the transgressions of the past come to kind of haunt the present. And it's funny that we're still just 2 centuries past the witch trial, but we're still very much in this kind of blurry, dreamlike European kind of blanket past. But in the present in the film, it is this kind of family curse, and everything from the portraiture that kind of then like, well, here are the existing portraits, and here's this one of Barbara Steele kind of crudely evoked nude holding snakes, and like, okay, well that would be something unresolved from the past, and that the burning was never successful. That it seems like whether it was just nature or whether it was her putting the curse on everyone. It is this thing that has not been able to be resolved. The kind of the evil was not really destroyed. It was just kind of laid dormant, and hence that kind of amazing cross, staring down to make sure the evil doesn't kind of rise up, and what happens when it does. But this idea, of the Gothic, that it is kind of also very distrustful of modernity whenever modernity kind of is, and distrustful of reason and logic and science, right? That it's this thing that, yes, sure, we're elevated and we have these almost, kind of modern featuring characters, but actually, it's the cross, and we have to burn evil women at the stake that actually solves something. And I think it's one of the kind of remarkable things also about typically with the Gothic, which is that there is a happy ending. But in this one, it's very interesting. And one I had forgotten until I rewatched it for our chat, that my memory was like, it really focuses on the love story that, she's back alive. And somewhere in the background, they're burning the witch. That doesn't matter. But no, it cuts from, the kind of final love scene or, zooming in for the kiss back to the burning pyre. and that's where we get the end. And I think like that's again this kind of interesting idea that the Gothic has, which is that, yeah, sure, there's the modern world and we've come so far, but what you really need to do is this kind of almost, elemental and even civilization notion of how to handle the uncanny or the evil. And that's a, pretty, I think, cynical or despairing maybe look at whatever the modern world has given us. And it's interesting just to see that, we're maybe 7 years on from horror films even being allowed by the Italian film industry. And so this idea that, we're maybe borrowing for what is a big box office, kind of draw by having, vampires or witchcraft or whatever it is, and having these kind of Gothic trappings. But it's also, I think, is a country 15 years out from World War II. And yet only, kind of a few years into even having this sort of side being permitted. And it's reaching pretty far back into these kind of unresolved, I think, cultural elements as well.
Part of the reason that they were seeking at this time, they were trying to do an international film that would appeal to folks after seeing the success of Hammer's horror of Dracula. And honestly, with that, the Gothic touches in this seem to me to be come more directly inspired by the 1930s Universal Dracula, with the crypts and the creatures creeping around and things like that. As far as the Gothic stuff goes, from what I've read about that back in the day, and you guys can please correct me if you get me wrong, you've got things like the Castle of Otranto, the Portrait of Dorian Gray, and as I understand it, people in that time frame, they loved these disintegrating castles so much they used to build ruins on their property. Some of them, these they didn't begin as ruins. They just built ruins because they thought they were atmospheric. I particularly like those. You had the famous book, The Monk, in which the guy sells his soul to the devil for worldly pleasures. And you also have, as we said, the emergence of science. Science will explain everything we can. All of these old folk tales, they're nothing but garbage. Well, not always. And in fact, it's funny because if I remember right, a long time, and of course, these stories come out of the Soviet Union, or what we would consider at one time the Soviet Union. After a while, when the communists took over, I don't think they wanted to have these kind of rich stories anymore because they were considered decadent. They wanted more contemporary stuff. They wanted emphasis on technology and things. So we go back and forth, and then you still get, and I'm sure we'll get to discussion of it, we get eventually the Russian film V, which went into that territory and did such a spectacular job with a reinterpretation of this story. I have a copy. I started to read it, but I couldn't get it. I have a copy of this book, and it has the original story in it. But and I couldn't get it. It's a long story. It's like 40 pages long, but it does focus more on the people and the folklore and the creatures like the V, rather than individual vampire witches rising from the grave.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good jumping off point because, Nikolai Gogol's story, Vij, basically all that remains is some of the character names that are brought over to this story. It's not a faithful adaptation. And Bava actually talked about that. He's like, with the help of two other screenwriters, we managed to not have any of the source material in there in the final product. What we've got is a story about kind of a generational curse. And Ian, you brought up something really, I thought, interesting, is that, yes, not only do we have this cross and the window in the coffin that is keeping it in, but as I was watching it this most recent time, like, we actually never find out what it was that actually resurrects Aja. It's like, is it the blood? Is it the mask coming off? Is it the cross being broken? It's like there's all sorts of things that it could be. It allows her to reemerge.
I hadn't thought about that either until you just, in terms of the resurrection, until you just brought up those three things. I think it was the combination of all of them in sequence. You had the destruction of the cross,
Yep.
if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah, that because it kind of
Well,
crumbles.
you also have a giant friggin' bat, and has there
Right.
ever been a bigger bat in Gothic cinema?
Probably not. Well, we don't see much of it. It's mostly like swatting things off screen, and that's probably for the best. But no, you've got the smoke alarm, which is the cross kind of falling apart, loses its cosmic battery. You've got the removal of the mask, which then frees up those empty eye sockets to receive the blood that drips into them.
Right.
So it's kind of like all the the hazardous materials lab, all the fail safes coming apart, and then allowing for the resurrection of this witch vampire lady, whatever she's supposed to be.
That's a great analogy. Yeah, they put three redundant safety systems in there, and like, what's the chance they're all going to fail in this specific order?
And in addition to that, you got the little icon that tells you if you're
Oh, that's right.
stupid enough to resurrect this thing, here's your disaster recovery plan.
Yeah, the little St. George,
Poison control. Call the number. Yeah.
And Colin, you mentioned Barbara Steele. We have her in a dual role here, but this is kind of her introduction to as a horror icon, but also to Italian horror. Roger Corman is going to borrow her in a second to do Pit and the Pendulum, but everybody is just going to jump on the Barbara Steele bandwagon and get her in their movies, Margheriti and Freda. She makes such an impressive entrance here. And that opening scene, we get the reveal, but then we also get that amazing reveal of her other character with the two large mastiffs.
I was watching this with my wife when she shows up in the cemetery, walking her two giant black dogs in her cloak in the graveyard at what seems to be dusk. I'm like, this is goth GF, like before that was a meme, like I think of like Morticia Addams, you got Vampiria, all of the classic, prototypes of the goth GF. I don't think that Barbara Steele in this specific movie gets enough credit for that. And then homeboy main character, I forget his name, is just completely
Andre?
Yeah, he's just completely taken with her and completely smitten. And like, he gets back in the carriage and he's just looking back, like, as they drive away. I said out loud, I was like, honestly, man, I get it. My wife wasn't certain exactly what I meant, but she is regal. She is stoic. She has that sort of decaying European aristocracy thing where she's just, plays her cards very close to the chest. And I think you can project a lot onto that character, and she underplays it. I think as Asa, you might say she overplays it a little bit, but as Katia, I think she underplays it, perfectly. And it's that enigmatic, it's sort of like, the Gothic equivalent of the femme fatale character. Like, what is she thinking? Is she dangerous? How much does she know? All of that. I think it's a great performance. And certainly, I don't use the word iconic lightly, but I think it's definitely appropriate here.
Well, and I think that image of her with the spike marks in her face, I think that is an iconic horror image. Craig, how about you?
Well, I think that Barbara Steele, I mean, as others have said, she became sort of the face of Italian Gothic horror for a better part of a decade. I mean, it isn't until like Curse of the Crimson Altar in 1968 that she started saying, "Okay, I'm done with these now. See ya, bye." And then she sort of goes into hibernation for a while. But she has these piercing eyes. I mean, you look at the poster. Like there are various posters but there's this one where it's just a close-up of her face with these eyes that are just sort of daring you to watch my movie. You think you can take me? And I have to say, having met her in person, because she was at Horror Hound like 15 years ago or something, and she was lovely, and we talked for like 5 minutes. She has this sort of presence. And I mean, it comes across very well on screen, but in person, it's just, she's just very captivating. You want to know what is the mystery that she's hiding, that she's, behind her smile, behind this kind of, I mean, as Katia, she's, we don't know exactly where she falls on the good evil scale, because literally the first thing we see of her, she's all in black. She's in, she's got these huge massives. She's, there's this camera move in to just sort of like, okay, is this Asya already resurrected? We don't know. And it's, and until we find out later on, there is that sort of duality. And I mean, we can also, spoilers, at the end, when the two of them are together, sort of exchanging life forces, who is who at any given moment. And that's a testament to Steele's abilities as a performer.
Craig, I just want to jump in for a second. I was at that Horror Hound where Barbara Steele was, and I met her then too. I had not seen any of her films, but it was just one of those things. She never does conventions, that kind of a deal. So took the opportunity to get a nice signed glossy photo from her. I think I said, "Thank you, love your work." It was a complete lie. Now it's come true because I do. But I'm kind of glad I wasn't familiar with her, because I probably would have been a slobbering fanboy mess had I known.
Good thing she didn't ask you what your favorite roles were or something like that.
The one where you play the evil character. I don't know.
Right.
Oh yeah, the creepy lady. Right.
Yeah.
Well, just talking about scream queens, and that term gets kind of bandied around, but what struck me rewatching is that the variety of screams we get from Barbara Steele in this movie are pretty impressive. That there's screams of terror as Katia, there's screams of agony as Asa, but that she really is given her money's worth. And the only comparable level, I think, of kind of, transcending film and transcending maybe whether you've seen Black Sunday or not, is Elsa Lanchester as the Bride of Frankenstein, and as Mary Shelley at the beginning of James Whale's film. That, it really, I think, is that iconic from the kind of, pegged rictus when she's first kind of resurrected or coming back to life. That there's something that I think, really spans now kind of, time. It's just, it's in eternity, just as, the kind of Bride of Frankenstein hissing is kind of just, it belongs to eternity, not just, film fandom, but just kind of horror at large. I think it's been kind of reproduced so endlessly now that it just kind of belongs to popular culture, but also kind of seeing its whatever seeds everywhere, and I know Tim Burton is a big fan of the film, and I don't want to get too far, into kind of the legacy of Black Sunday, but just seeing her kind of also as the kind of prototypical, not just, maybe goth GF, but also, kind of seeing those seeds and everything from Winona Ryder and Christina Ricci and Kristen Ritter, and that kind of, dark brunette. And I think that this film probably we'd still be talking about it in 2025, whoever was the female lead. But I don't know if we'd be talking about it, without Barbara Steele. And I think international and Euro horror needed Barbara Steele, but Barbara Steele also really needed international horror, that they didn't know what to do with her, really. She was under contract, and she's in an Alfred Hitchcock Presents kind of as like a beatnik kind of surf girl in the really kind of macabre one, the Beta Delta Gamma, where the guy pretends to be dead and it goes wrong from there. But that she didn't really fit in, especially as kind of, a young woman kind of into, she does seem kind of odd and out of time and out of kind of modernity, especially in the late 50s, early 60s. And so what a great, kind of, you've got chocolate in my peanut butter, you've got peanut butter in my chocolate, that Barbara Steele, kind of grew in this reputation. But I think it also really was no small part in selling these films to not just, a continental European audience, but to an international audience.
Before we had Barbara Steele, we did have stuff like Theda Bara, the original screen vamp, and we had Carol Borland, who was in Mark of the Vampire with Bela Lugosi, and we had Lois Albritton in Son of Dracula. But kind of, I agree, Barbara Steele is kind of the apotheosis of that sort of thing. My wife personally hates her. I don't know if it's jealousy. She's kind of funny looking. Yeah, but whether you see her as, the tortured souls in Terror Creatures from the Grave, or even later on when she's in David Cronenberg's Shivers, she's still got that magnificent, eerie presence to her. Oh, and by the way, I believe I was at the same 15 years ago Horror Hound convention, and I was a slobbering fanboy to her. And I think I asked her what did you think of getting all that green makeup on your face in Curse of the Crimson Altar? And I think she said, because I don't know if it's you, but she talks very softly. She talked very softly, and she said, I rather enjoyed that bit.
Let's talk about Mario Bava. This is, again, the beginning of his career as a horror director. He had saved a couple of Ricardo Freda's films when Freda basically just, turned it over to him, I Vampiri and Kaltiki. But he started off as a cinematographer and would continue to be the cinematographer for most of his films, even though occasionally you would see credit given to other people. In this case, we've got Ubaldo Terzano, who would be his camera operator for several of his big films, and actually was credited as a cinematographer for like Blood and Black Lace, things like that. There is such confidence here. This is somebody who's coming out guns blazing with a true vision. And not only is he presenting something visually, but he's also into like the special effects side of things, in that he will work to create a certain effect for just a small little piece of film, but it's fun to see it all come out. And then he would go on to have an amazing career. But let's go ahead and talk about like this film in particular. Like, what are some highlight moments or visuals that come out for you? Like, what are some, when you think of Black Sunday, what comes up for you?
On this viewing, the thing that I keyed into the most was how he moves the camera. I can't think of too many films of this vintage that move the camera that much. He's just moving the camera when he doesn't need to. And all those, I guess they're crane shots. I'm not familiar enough with the hardware of the time to know exactly how it was achieved. Nowadays you do it with like a gimbal, but the sort of where the camera's traveling through the bed chambers and it's going vertically and across the room. And then there's that crazy when she goes to the dead dad and that camera does that crazy spirally 360.
Yep.
I still don't know how that was achieved. It wasn't an invisible cut. Like they really did that with the camera. And I was just trying to picture in 1960, how would I pull this off?
Well, you're Mario Bava and you invent it. That was invented. Him and his dad Eugenio came up with the camera rig that would flip around and land in that 180 position.
Yeah, the sheer amount of moving the camera, which is one of the things I think Argento took from him. I think swooping and pushing in and pulling back and tracking and just doing all kinds of it gives what is otherwise a rather sedate story, kind of like deliberately paced story. It gives it this urgency and franticness. And that was what I really admired on this viewing.
I think one of the things about this film, which makes it very visually distinct, is the fact that I'd say 80% of it, it's either at night or you're inside the castle, so that when we have those rare moments, like there's this one moment like 60 minutes in where we cut to daylight and it's a shock. It's like, wait, what are you doing? You have this mood that you've been developing for the past 60 minutes of these creepy interiors and the cobwebs and then suddenly bright sunlight and you're like, oh my God. And as it goes along, you sort of see it seep away again till we're back again at night. And even like in the very beginning of the movie where it's still supposed to be daylight, when the coachman is driving the two doctors through the woods, that's supposed to be day, but it looks pretty dark to me. It looks pretty, you have the tree branches threatening and all these things, and the coachman is trying to get to where they're going before darkness falls, because obviously he's very superstitious, and these doctors are like, yeah, whatever, we'll just sort of hang out in this crypt while you fix the wheel. The atmosphere is just ladled on so well. There are some exteriors, especially in that daylight sequence, but most of the rest of the film is all shot in studios, so he can control everything from the way the fog rolls in and the way that the tree branches jut into frame. And I think about that opening sequence. I mean, it's kind of hard not to harp on it. Is you've got the fires, you've got all these men in these black hoods, and you've got the cross that Asa has been attached to, and you see that Javutic have already been taken care of. He's already had the mask nailed down to his face, so she knows what's coming when the mask is approaching her. And just the play of light and shadow is just so extraordinary that, you know, when you actually have these moments of daylight, it's unreal. That's what's unreal. The rest is what's real. The rest is, you know, the reality that we're living in this story.
So many good things in there. It's hard to pick. It's like going through a Whitman sampler or something. Well, one thing, and we were just talking about just the interplay of shadows when they're bringing the spiked mask towards her. All the special effects going on that they achieved with after Dr. Kruvion won't leave the dead alone and has to take the mask off, and cuts himself on the shard of glass, and after a while you slowly see that, you know, blood or something. I think Wikipedia said they used like tomato juice and rice to make it look like maggots and stuff. And then when her eyes are starting to reform, they used
Fried eggs.
Fried eggs, yeah. Still creepy as hell. So you've got that.
Yeah.
And I think they used mirrors for this when Javutic appears next to Asa's portrait. You know, that's pretty spectacular as well. And while I'm also talking about the eyes coming out, when they take the mask off and scorpions come out, I don't know if scorpions are really, you know, are those
that area?
really live in Moldavia? You know, I mean, or is it like the armadillos in Bela Lugosi's? Right?
Mhm.
So, but those are some of the ones that come to mind.
Those are satanic scorpions. They're everywhere.
Yeah, they're native to hell. There you go.
Yeah.
Ian? You know, three things aside from the obligatory opening scene. Two of them are chilling, and one is kind of funny. There's the bit where the village girl witnesses the black carriage passing by in slow motion. I don't know if this is an effect they were going for, but almost pulled off, or what. But the carriage comes gallivanting through the woods, and then we cut to it going away from the camera. And as it does, there's a heavy mist, and it almost looks like the carriage is disappearing into the mist. It's not really, because you can see it, you know, moving beyond the parameters of the mist, but it's a great effect. I feel like if anyone were to, God forbid, remake this movie, they could add that kind of effect, because it's kind
Well,
of nice.
somebody did.
They did. I missed that, man. Maybe
Roberto
for
Bava
good
did
reason.
in like the late 80s.
How did that turn out?
We don't talk about that version of the
Okay.
Mask of Satan, if you don't
Yeah,
mind.
it was called The Mask of Satan, and it's interesting. It's a curiosity, but it's no patch on the original, let's say.
It's the Fight Club of genre films, so we don't talk about it. The other one is the scene where Katia's energy is sort of transferring or being drained, or Aja is essentially, or Katia is transforming into Aja. The beautiful face is sort of becoming more witch and hag-like and drained of the life force. And I haven't read up on anything in terms of the making of this, the effects. I kind of don't want to, because what I see in this film is magic.
Yeah.
I rewound and I rewatched that again, because it seems like something that shouldn't have been possible to do at that time, short of sorcery. The last thing that I'll say was, it's kind of a funny effect, because it just reminded me of like a Roadrunner cartoon when Constantine is he's backing down this hallway, and he's being pursued, and this panel in the floor opens up behind him, which is great from just an audience appreciation moment, because we are ahead of the character, like something bad is about to happen. I hope he finds a way to avoid this gaping hole, and he does it. And for that split second, his hand goes over the hole as he's backing up, and you're wondering. It's almost like when Wile E. Coyote gets over the cliff, and there's that moment where he's hanging over it before he falls down. We get that here, but it's told it's in the context of a horror movie. It's just great stuff, and it's one of those, you know, great examples of people say, well, I don't want to watch movies that, you know, black and white movies or anything that came out before the year 2000. You know, they're all lame and stupid and too stodgy and proper. There's some amazing things going on in these old horror movies. And, you know, I just named 4 examples, and there's a ton more. You don't even have to look that far for them in Black Sunday that you can recommend this to any genre fan or any fan of just like cinema and say, here, go back and look at this and then consider the other decades that you've ignored and have fun exploring?
I think it's worth pointing out at this time, like so many of these effects are happening in camera.
Mhm.
They're happening. I mean, the one that you mentioned, Alan, where we see Givuto kind of like show up. I mean, that is achieved via a mirror that's placed off camera. The scene that you referenced, Ian, and if you want to hold your hands over your ears while I reveal how that was done, that was something that was done in a similar way with the 1932 Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, where we have red and blue makeup on, and way they change the filter is when the makeup shows up or when it doesn't show up. And so you see it happen as Katia gets older, and then you see as Aja gets younger. Yeah, stuff that's just happening in frame, like all the stuff you referenced, Craig. The fact that we're on a studio, that we're on a set, and these branches and the movement, Colin, what you talked about with the camera movement. I mean, we get this illusion of this hell crazy ride with a carriage that is on a set and barely moving. It's just branches being moved around, shadows being moved around, and the carriage moving back and forth. But we get the illusion of urgency and drama. And all of that is happening in this very contained space. And then we also have these wonderful matte paintings where we get levels, we get the moon in the sky and clouds passing over. Like all of that is happening. It's just magic. It's just cinema magic. Like none of that is actually happening. And this I actually wrote down. I'm like, it reminds me a little bit of our kaiju hero, Eiji Tsuburaya. He did a lot of the special effects for Ishiro Honda and a lot of the Godzilla films, things like that, because he wasn't going for realism. He was looking for an effect. He wanted you to tell that there was something happening, similar to like Harryhausen. We're not going for realism. We're going for an illusion, and we want you to appreciate what's happening. And I think
You're
that's
going for poetry.
exactly what's happening for Bava is he's creating something for you, and he wants you to see this was made by man. This isn't something that just happened that I captured with my camera. This is something I did for you.
Just a note on both the actual Mask of Satan and also I think
Yes.
the cast of the face which the eggs rise from. Those were all sculpted by Eugenio Bava, who is credited with a lot of kind of original special effects and in-camera techniques, including I think unfairly not credited for what's known as I'm going to butcher the German, the Schuften technique, where you hollow out part of a mirror to make it seem like a larger landscape, kind of an alternative to having someone against a matte painting. One that I think no one has talked about, that it's a very brief thing, but just kind of I think the sequence that it is kind of chock-a-block. And I think, again, what sets this apart from both the AIP, maybe Corman at least, AIP films a little later, but also the Hammer films that were previous and concurrent with it, the moment where Asya is pretending to be Katia, kind of in the crypt, and her cloak falls open, and there's just the rib cage of the skeleton. And it's, again, just, it's a brief moment, but it's so kind of lurid and dark, but also just kind of, again, uncanny. And I think, the kind of aggregate consensus here, and as you just said, AC, that it has this dreamlike quality that, yes, we know this isn't really a vampire resurrected 2 centuries later to get revenge on her family and those, who imprisoned her. But it has this logic of dream kind of throughout. And I think this kind of feeling the entire time we're experiencing it, as there are these flourishes, that it kind of operates on this kind of nightmarish logic, including what I had heard, at least from the Tim Lucas commentary, that some of the stuff was kind of reshot or shot later, and that some of the scenes, maybe as we're seeing them, are out of sequence. And that's why Barbara Steele is behaving kind of strangely in some of the scenes, is that maybe originally she was meant to be kind of more possessed by the evil spirit even before, or maybe they've traded places and it was going to kind of go, and then they went with that. But again, I think that all adds just this feeling that you're kind of always a little bit out of joint with the kind of understanding. And I think, those moments, even in between effects, kind of add to that feeling of being a little off kilter, more than in the Hammer movies, where you're just kind of waiting for Christopher Lee to show back up, when you're waiting for Peter Cushing to do something nefarious again. And like, okay, now it's at the inn, and we have the, whatever townsfolk having a revel or something. There's even in those moments, and just talking about another camera mode where the camera comes out from the bassoon or whatever it is in the bar scene. You're always kind of, I think, kept on your toes.
I'm glad you brought up Eugenio Bava, because that idea of the mask, we have so many great visuals, and I think a lot of that goes to the credit of Giorgio Giovannini, who's our set designer. He worked with Bava a lot as well. We have so much texture and like a lot of like repeated griffin imagery, the griffin being emblematic of Jovanovic, patterns and depth and shadows and all of that, whether we're indoors in the crypt, whether we're outdoors in the cemetery, whether we're in the castle. There's always something really sumptuous about the visuals here. And I really, I loved seeing that this time around. Again, coming back to the idea of like Bava is creating something for you to look at, and you can feel the effort that's in place.
Would this movie be half as effective as it is if it was in color? Because I am of the feeling that this is one of those must be in black and white, must have the inky, moody shadows. And I think one of the reasons why, I mean, he does some wonderful work in color, and it's appropriate for the films that he does it in. If he had been offered color for this, I'm glad he turned it down,
Well, they wanted him to do this in color, and he fought for it to be black and white. What was interesting, though, is that he still is using a lot of the same colored gels that would be emblematic of his color films, but he's just using them to brighten the whites and darken the darks.
Yeah, I think that's a great. I'm so glad you said that, because I had the same thought. It's like I think people nowadays, we think, like you brought up Psycho earlier from the same year. Oh, it's in black and white because it's an old movie, and old movies are in black and white. Well, Hitchcock's like 2 or 3 films before that were in color. Making that in black and white was a major artistic choice, and I think what AC was just talking about, this idea of the artificiality, the deliberate unreality, the stylized, I want you to see that I am doing something artificial, is kind of lost at some point in the later half of the 20th century, where we decided that everything needed to be as realistic as possible. And yeah, black and white is a big, it's not just a technical limitation. It is an artistic choice to signal to the viewer that we are doing something that is not in consensus reality.
If this had been in color, I have a feeling a lot of these luscious sets and textures that we're talking about would have lost some of their magic and would have potentially looked more like sets. The other thing is, with that effect of the eyes coming back to life, someone would easily have said, "Hey, those are eggs." But I go back to that opening scene, which we can't stop talking about, and for good reason. When that mallet comes down into the mask, we see blood seeping down onto her neck. It's a brief shot, but it has this texture where it's not quite the black blood that you might expect. It looks almost like pus. It's got different colors and textures to it, or I should say shades of gray and black there. So it's more unsettling. I think that's the one, if I call it a continuity error, it's not quite the right phrase, but that mallet and that guy swinging that mallet onto that mask with those nails on that face would have been pulp. There's no like cutesy like, oh, I'm Barbara Steele, I got some holes strategically placed. No, it would have been, hamburger, but maybe that's just the power of Satan. I have no idea.
Missed opportunity for Lamberto in the 80s, right? Could have brought the pulp face back from the dead.
Niall?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I think I'm of the parallax view, or some other Alan Pakula movie. That I think it still would be great. I mean, if you look at just his very next thing, Hercules in the Haunted World. At least I think that's what he did next, or just Black Sabbath. I think that that kind of what I think of as just the worst of the worst with 60s color, at least how it's aged, like The Great Escape or something, where everything is just like brown and army green and sandy. It's just like I don't think we would have had. I think it still would have had that painterly quality, but I don't think it would have its home kind of, as we talked about earlier, kind of between the 2 feet of the Universal studio's kind of legacy of crumbling castles and mist and monsters, and Hammer being a little bit more blood and guts and gore, and the practical effects. But I do think it would be something else. It would kind of live in that space. Mario Bava, before feeling kind of pressed into the film industry, studied as a painter. So I think we would still get those colors. I think it still would be good, but I don't know if it would have its feet in those kind of two camps and existing kind of as much out of time. In the same way, I guess that, yeah, Psycho would feel kind of more of its time had it been in color and looked like Dial M for Murder, where everyone's in Eastman primary colors. I think that it gets to live on as maybe seeming older, but also seeming as this thing that's like out of time.
I mean, we had a Hammer Gothic quality, and we had a Roger Corman color Gothic quality. Whether it would be as effective or not, I can't say. I mean, he did something similar when he did Kill Baby Kill, a few years later, where we have a very kind of colored Gothic quality that feels kind of out of time, out of place. But,
if you body too.
Yeah, whipping the body. If you compare this to, say, Antonio Margheriti's Long Hair of Death or Castle of Blood,
Or The Ghost.
Like they're not the same. Like Bava's film and just the look of it is just a different level. And so I would like to say that, were he to have done this in color, it would be like Hammer on steroids. You'd be like, wow, like that's what that color Gothic could look like. So, I don't know that it would have been more or less effective. There's a part of me that goes, I wouldn't mind seeing what Mario Bava's version of this in color would have been, but he clearly wanted to do it this way. And one of the things on the Tim Lucas commentary is I think that transformation was one of the reasons why he wanted to do it in black and white, because he knew he could achieve that effect in camera of switching the life force from Katia to Aja. Whenever I flip it on, I'm just like, I go into another part of my brain that is that kind of supercharged universal classic feel, while also having that extra, you have blood splashing out of the top of the mask when the mallet hits, and you're like, holy crap, they didn't do that in House of Dracula. I do want to quickly mention our score by Roberto Nicolosi, which would be replaced for the AIP release by Les Baxter, who did a lot of those Roger Corman films. And then again, when he did Black Sabbath, once again, Nicolosi's score is replaced by Les Baxter. But I really like what Nicolosi does. I love Katia's theme. It does kind of participate in setting that dream quality to it.
That beginning with the music, I mean, setting the mood completely, but also that it is a little bit of a play. Bava was aware and maybe having a little bit of fun with the rank organization beginning with the guy hitting the big gong. But I think that sonically there's a little bit of that as well, because we are being brought in, and it's a minute before the credits roll on these things. And so it is kind of bringing us into the world. And I just think that is, whether it's true or not, if you are a big also rank organization or British studio films of the same era fan, it's a really, really kind of fun little Easter egg or things in dialogue with each other.
I kind of prefer Les Baxter's score for this. And because I'm a troll. It's scary. I want the thundering, and Nicolosi's just beautiful. My wife always says this. We'll watch something like Cannibal Holocaust. Boy, they sure have some beautiful music in these horrendous films that you watch, whether it's Riz Ortolani or Nicolosi. But it is funny to note Les Baxter was also into the exotica craze that, swept the country with Quiet Village and music like that, and Hawaiian and
Martin Denny.
Yeah, Martin Denny, those sorts of things. He took Nicolosi's music for Katia's theme and reworked it and it's on one of his Jewels of the Pacific or albums or something. So
Alan, you're a brave man. There are very, very few films that I would not watch with my wife, but Cannibal Holocaust is one of them.
Okay, I tell a fib. She didn't watch that one with me. She watched something like, Black Gloves in a Red Velvet Orchid something. She could tolerate that one a little better. Yeah. But she said the same thing. Boy, sure, beautiful music on it. Yeah.
You talked about the opening credits, Niall, and something that jumped out at me this time is that this is a Galatea, but also Jolly Film.
Jolly, yes.
And I was like, if ever anything was more ironic than calling this a jolly film, I was like, wow, okay. Bava was 46 when he directed this film. He had been working in the industry. So, he's coming late to the game, but I think he's gained all of that life experience as a painter, as a cinematographer, as, just a human. And so when he finally does step into the director's chair, he is ready and up for the task, and he would produce masterpiece after masterpiece after masterpiece. And it's just fun that this was the beginning of it for him.
Apart from the opening, the other iconic moment for me is after Asya has started to regenerate, and she sort of calls psychically to Juvutic in the graveyard, and you see the soil start to pulsate, and then it opens up, and then you have the hand that comes out with that crawls out, and then he pushes his way to the surface, and he's still got the mask on. And for like a brief moment, I thought, is he gonna spend the rest of the movie looking like that? Because that would be freaking amazing. And then he sort of takes it off and throws it down, and he's got the cobwebs on. He has the same kind of pockmarked face, which is still fine. I mean, it's still a great look, but it's just that moment where he emerges. That was the moment when I fell in love with this movie. I mean, I was liking it up to that point, and I was blown away by the opening and everything. But when that moment happens, I'm like, okay, this movie has got its grip on me.
And you talk about a visceral scene, I mean, it hurts to tear off a bandage, and he's like, he's making this groaning sound for me. I agree, 100%. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Well, and I am too, because when I was watching it this time, I had a thought of this is, in the heyday of the 50s monsters. And so, when he comes out of there, he looks like a monster. He looks like a humanoid monster with a giant mask on. And it really manages to kind of bridge a lot of those different, it's like, is it a ghost story? Is it a vampire story? Is it a witch story? Is it a monster movie? Is it a Hammer film? Is it a Universal film?
Hey, here's a question. How many masks do we think that they had? Because they lost two of them to, ended up in these crypts with the...
How many witches are they having to hammer these onto?
Yeah, I mean, do they have they didn't have a factory back then, but
yeah.
I mean, they're very specific looking masks. They could have been that easy to make.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like there's franchise opportunities out the wazoo for this thing.
I agree. I'd like to think, being the good industrious Christians that they were, that we got a system going. We got an assembly line. We got all the masks we need. Bring on your heretics.
People come in and say, okay, I need 6 devil masks for next weekend. I'm going to need 14 the week after, because we're going after this whole village and this family. So, somebody's got a nice little cottage industry going. It's sort of like in the spaghetti Western, when people walk into town and you see the man who makes the coffins saying, okay, I need to make 3 more coffins today.
Yep.
Well, maybe the mother who tells her kid to go at midnight and milk the cow, maybe that's what the little girl does on her off hours when she's not washing the clothes in the stream, or informing the tourists. I don't know.
We've entered into a whole other realm of sociology.
I'm really glad that little girl made it, by the way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you think she's toast. You're thinking back to Frankenstein, Frankenstein's monster throwing the girl in the water and stuff. You're like, oh no, this is it. This is a wrap for this little girl. But yeah, she makes it, and she ends up being an MVP of the movie because she drops a dime on the carriage.
That reveal of the sheet that goes down the river, and we find our dead body. Like the kids are the heroes of this movie, really.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I mean, even just in terms of the conventions of horror, which I mean, this is still pretty new for the genre, but I mean, a girl going out to milk a cow in the middle of the night, the monster coming to life literally feet away from her. We can see it, but she can't. You just know that she's going to be the first victim of this thing, and she's not. And that's, again, something that you can be immersed in the genre and go back and watch something that's 65 years old at this point and still find a surprise, and just wonder why modern filmmakers don't milk these things. Sorry, that's not a reference
at midnight.
Back to the cow. Yes.
I mean, you also have the Leopard Man, the Val Lewton film, from,
right? That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, where where you have the kid who is being sent to buy sugar or something,
yeah,
and she tarries too long, and then the last you see her refers the blood seeping under the door because she didn't make it back in time. So yeah, there was a precedent for this. Kids
Which
got
Bava
killed.
referenced later in Baron Blood, right?
Hmm.
Let's circle back around, offer our final thoughts on Black Sunday, celebrating its 65th anniversary. Ian, let's kick things off with you.
I've said all I think I need to say, which is if you haven't watched this movie, definitely check it out. It's worth it. If you're not hooked by the opening scene alone, I would say you're safe to turn it off because the rest of the movie is going to somehow not be for you. But if you decide to stick with it, you're in for a hell of a ride. Although I will say, again, I don't think there's quite anything that matches the thrill of that opening 2 minutes. But as we've discussed for the last hour plus, there's plenty to appreciate in terms of the atmosphere, the performances, and even, yes, the special effects and the storytelling through those special effects. I think are going to be quite marvelous. And like me, give you an even shorter fuse of patience for what horror has become in recent decades.
Speaking of heretics, I've never been a big Hammer fan. None of them do it for me. When they do, it's not the, like the mainline classics. I like the, Vampire Lovers sequels, a few of those, and the Hands of Dr. Jekyll, or a few of the more minor ones are the Hammer ones I like. But like the really iconic ones, I for some reason could just never get into, and I always appreciated the Italian Gothics more, and or the Euro in general, the Euro sleaze Gothics. And this is ground zero for all of that. When I watch a film like this, I get what I feel like I was missing from the Hammer stuff, some like disconnect I have. About every 5 minutes in this movie, I see another shot that makes me say, that is the most beautiful shot in this movie. And then 5 minutes later, nope, that is the most beautiful shot. And it could be something as simple as just like a wall and like torchlight reflecting off the textures of the stone wall, and just like, like the way he uses silhouettes. My jaw's hanging open again for just something visual that is, it's showy, in the sense of, like AC was saying, like he really wants you, well, we say he, it's obviously not all Bava, but they're all working under him. All of these people are working on the same vision. They want you to be impressed by what they're doing. It's also subtle, in its showiness. It calls attention to itself without hamming it up, I guess you would say. It's just a continual, Craig was talking about like the moment he fell in love with this movie. I feel like I just keep falling in love with this movie every couple of minutes. You can trace a lot of stuff from Euro horror, or that was in Euro horror, back to this movie. Even things like Tombs of the Blind Dead, the slow motion galloping, to the slow motion carriage in this, and just so many little things that it's almost like a Rosetta Stone for understanding the next 2.5 decades of European horror.
Again, if you haven't seen it, it is one of the greatest horror films ever made, and you really should get it. I know some black and white is off-putting to a lot of the younger generation, but it works so well in this place. Like I said, you couldn't watch a film noir without it being in black and white. There's that famous Hitchcock movie where they put the little light in the poisoned milk that wouldn't work in a color film and stuff. So that said, there were a couple things that I did want to point out as we're leaving. One thing is, depending on the version that you see, I was surprised in the not the AIP one, but when poor Dr. Kruvayand, after he's undead and he gets exorcised by getting a spike put into his eye, in the uncut version, that vitreous humor or whatever it is that comes out of his eye goes halfway up the
priest's arm.
Because I was pretty astonished by that. That's pretty gory. So that said, I have a horror movie film group that I have at my house every now and then. I don't know if I would show this, just because I think most of them would be okay with it. But that first 5 minutes, with the exorcism, we showed the autopsy of Jane Doe, and I had one person in there stare at the floor the whole time. 1960, but still, plus a couple other things that I would love to see. I read on Wikipedia that they considered using fangs for the people, and I would love to see if there were any productions. So I think it works better without the fangs. It's too obvious, but I like to see that, and I would also love to see if anybody still has in their movie memorabilia collection the little protective chant that they gave you when you went into the AIP theaters. You know, they give you a little piece of paper that was supposed to protect you, like they at the beginning of Burn Witch Burn, they had something on the screen for you like that. But I would love to see if I could get my hands on one of those.
I think for me, the thing that what I carry away from Black Sunday, and it literally was the first Bava film I ever saw. And it was a while before I saw any others, so that was the only Bava that I knew for a while. I think the next one I saw was probably Diabolic, because they showed that on Mystery Science Theater. So very different, the opposite end of the spectrum there. I think the thing about Black Sunday for me is it feels, for these 1960 horror films. I mean, we've mentioned a lot of other ones. The one that we haven't mentioned yet in connection with it would be Georges Franju's Eyes Without a Face, which is, I think, between the two of them, you have the most gruesome black and white horror films that you could have. They wouldn't work in color. I mean, you couldn't do Eyes Without a Face in color. I mean, just as Franco did, how many times? Probably half a dozen times in years later. But they have that haunting quality, and so you could have these really, the blood spurting and the gore, and you like when she opens you see her chest. There are all these things that would be off-putting in color, but you see it in black and white, and there's that sort of distancing effect. So you can feel the poetry that Bava's going for, that he's able to evoke this time, he's able to give you this dreamlike quality, which is still grounded in, I think black and white does that thing. It either it makes you think that this is real, this is documentary, or it makes you think that this is a dream. And I think this straddles that line very well.
Yeah, I could talk about Bava and any of his movies with the word black or the word blood in them all day, and all the others too. But I think just the parting thought would be, if this starts anyone off down a road of exploring more Italian or European horror from the time, or reaching a little bit further back than you normally do for your frights or for your thrills and chills, check out more of Barbara Steele's Euro horror. I think there's a lot there that doesn't maybe quite, I don't think anything tops Black Sunday as far as that. But also, I would just say, check out 8½, where Barbara Steele is one of the, kind of notable supporting roles, but she's in there. And even things, I think, seeing it again this time, just how much of the kind of maybe capital A art house directors borrow from. There's a kinship of everyone from like Louis Buñuel, Hungarian filmmakers like Miko Shanko of the Roundup and The Red and the White. I feel like if you like the kind of constantly moving camera and this kind of odd out of timeness that maybe is a critique of the moment it was made in, whether on the nose or not, there's a lot of kind of just European filmmakers who I think are just as playful and just as visually inventive, that this can kind of be the gateway drug from horror into some of those things that still are, I think, pretty eerie and pretty chilling, but that may not always come up in the guidebooks or on Bloody Disgusting, but I think have just as many frights in them. So give it a try. After, if you like Black Sunday, you'll love a lot of 1960s European filmmaking.
And Alan, I'm glad you mentioned the fangs, because this again, kind of going back to the idea, this is, supposedly a vampire film, or one of the effects that we didn't talk about that just popped into my head is Katia's father gets thrown into the fire, and you see his wax face melting, which we've seen before, but I've never seen an articulated wax face, like what's actually like going, as he's melting. I was like, that's incredible. So like Alan, that would probably put off your lighter hearted folks at your movie night. So
maybe I need one of those like fear flashers.
That's right. That's
like
right.
That.
Or you get like the ghost viewer where if you close
Yeah.
one eye, you don't have to see that. But yeah, this is.
Give him
this
the
is-
little incantation card from the AIP.
There you go.
I'm glad we're kicking off the Halloween season because it really does feel like this sets the mood. And I'm so thankful that all of you were able to join us to celebrate Mario Bava and celebrate this movie in particular. Looking forward to having you all on again very soon. Until next time, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare.